Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pepaw Knows Best. I'm Pepaw, and what I'd like to talk about today is raising children. Uh, it's not an easy thing to do. Sometimes it's very rewarding, if everything works out really well. But what I'd like to do is start out by just describing our situation. It really worked out well for us. We raised two children. Uh, One is 49. The other one would have been 41 a couple of days ago. He passed away. Our son passed away 5 years ago. But it was really like a tale of two cities, I guess. The Our daughter. I'll start with our daughter first. Our daughter was no problem at all. She was just a wonderful kid all the way through. From the very beginning. Um, Except for when my wife was in labor with her, she was in labor, I think, something like 2 days. And it was a long time. And she always minded, made good grades, graduated high school, went to college, got a degree in some type of degree in business, got a job, got married, had a girl of her own, a wonderful girl of her own. And she's been on cruise control ever since, I guess you'd call it. Now our son was different. He was always a good kid. He didn't give us any problems, but he was very immature when he was little. And I can still remember whenever his teacher we he did before first grade, before he was to go into first grade, his teacher, we had our end of year school conference with her, and she was getting real uncomfortable, I could tell, and she suggested that we hold him back because of his immaturity. Now, I know she hated saying that, and it's probably because there's probably been a lot of negative reactions from parents who are just really, too overly prideful of their children and think they're perfect and they don't need any extra help or anything. But we just agreed with her. We could see it. He didn't function well in that grade. He didn't learn. He didn't want to learn. He just he was just a mess. So we held him back, and I can say that was the single most important thing we ever did for him. After that, he functioned really well with the kids that he was then going through school with. All through grade school, he was really a good kid, and as he got older, his maturity levels seemed to be starting to exceed that of the kids that he was going through school with. He was given responsibilities that generally older, more mature kids are given. So, in the end, it ended up working out really well for him. But, when he got into the seventh grade, he was, if he had that lazy streak, which I guess probably all boys do, but he didn't want to do his schoolwork. He didn't want to do his homework. He didn't want to keep his grades up. It was a struggle for us trying to keep him going. And but I had an ace in the hole. He loved to play basketball, and I went to his coach, his seventh grade basketball coach, and told him that um, he our son has to make a B average and nothing lower than a C in order to play. And I had our son with us at the time, so he could see me tell the coach that. That way he would understand, and he have a visual of me telling the coach, and he would know that the coach would have expectations when it comes to his grades. But that was the second best thing we ever did for him, was leveraging his love of basketball. Uh, and after that, he went through school. He always made his grades. Now, one thing I need to say is the reason I chose B averages and nothing lower than the C. I told some parents, that I did that, or one or two parents that I did that, and they commented they told their kids they had to make A averages, which is fine if you got a real studious kid that's already inclined to be that way, you know, go for it. Power to you and power to your child. But with our son, I didn't want to set him up for failure because I just knew that if I set A averages, and that did enter my mind, but it didn't stay in there very long. I was just afraid he just wouldn't meet the standard, and then he would be left not meeting the standard and not playing. So that would be a good situation for him. So I felt really confident that he could make that standard, and he did. And he made it all the way through high school, and his grades, he always had good grades going through school. He wasn't a straight A student, but I don't think you have to be a straight A student to be a good student. He made good grades through school, and then he graduated high school and went on to college, graduated college, went to the same college my daughter went to, and his mother went to, and they all three of them got degrees. Now the reason I wanted to really get a handle on his grades is because of my experience in high school. I was very lazy in a couple of classes in high school. For the most part, I did okay, but just a couple of classes is all it takes. And I didn't graduate on time. I had to take two correspondence courses to graduate. And I didn't want him to fall in that trap because I didn't graduate on time and because I didn't, commit myself to my studies that it affected me. It limited my opportunities. I wanted to go to college and play football, but no colleges, no coaches are going to look at you if you don't have a high school degree, or high school diploma. Which, like I said, I got it a couple, probably within a year after graduating from high school, and then I tried out for a college football team, but it just wasn't going to work out because of my grades, because of my academics. So doing that, it really set him up for success. He ended up graduating college with a degree and some type of business degree. Got married, had three children of his own, and they're all three wonderful kids. He's got one's currently is 17. Got one is 14, and the last one is 9. And curious, out of that, all of our grandchildren, we have 4 total. The boy is the most difficult. So, boys and girls are different, and even among our grandchildren. But all that really worked well for him, and it. Let me scroll up here a little bit. Uh, that really set him on a path, both of them on a path to success, a lifetime of success, and not having to really struggle through life. Um, but I think to kind of go into the meat of this thing, beyond just our children's story, uh, some suggestions. One of them is I think children want more than anything to know that they are worth your time. They want to, you tell them, you show them that you love them by showing them that they are worth your time. And you do that with your actions. Now, one way to do that is to attend all of their events. We made it a point to attend all of our children's events, every one of them. Now, of course, there are some times when you can't make them, something comes up or work or whatever. But we made that point, and in those times when we couldn't be there, sometimes I would just ask one of the grandkids, is it okay? I've got something going on. Is it okay if I miss this thing? And they're okay with it. They'll say, yeah, sure, sure. They understand that you can't make it to everything that they have, particularly nowadays when kids are involved in so many different activities. But yeah, attend all their events. And another good way. So my first suggestion is if don't hesitate to hold your kid back for academic reasons. I don't think parents give a single thought to holding their kids back for academic reasons. Now, there's a lot of parents who hold them back for athletic reasons, which is fine. But if your kid is a little slow, a little immature, whatever, if he's not functioning well in that grade, hold him back a year, and I can just about guarantee you that'll be something you'll never regret, and it'll really help them out, and it'll help you out too, because it won't be not only not as much a struggle for your child, it won't be as much a struggle for you because you won't have to. It won't be so laborious for you to try to get them to make grades. But another way is to spend time with them when you come home from work, for instance. If sometimes parent may leave, one parent may leave before the kids get up, and the kids may not see their parents, all night until the next afternoon if they don't see them in the morning. And if that's a situation, I learned this myself. Sometimes when I would come home, I'd be really tired, and kids want to do something, and I'd ask them to put it off. Can we do it later? That kind of thing. Well, later would never come along, and I had a life changing experience in the first Gulf War, and after I came back, I never did that again. My daughter said she didn't see that in me, and it may not have been very pronounced with her, but I know I did it because that's one of the first things I thought of during this experience. So make it a point to spend a little bit of time with them. You don't have to be a long time. Just sit down with them on the couch and talk to them. Go in the bedroom, talk to them. Go outside and play a little catch or something. I did that several times. Both of them are like baseball, so we go out and play a little catch. And that will let them know. You can tell them you love them, and you can show them that you love them with actions like that. They will really appreciate you. They may not say it, but they will really appreciate you spending a little bit of time with them, and it will help them to become better children, better adults, and it also will help them to become better parents. And like I say, it can be just 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever the case may be, whatever it is they want, and then just say, can I need to go clean up or whatever, and they'll say, oh yeah, great. They'll be just thrilled to death that you took a little bit of time with them. And another thing that I learned the hard way is my daughter was talking to me one day. I was watching something on TV, and it was something I was really interested in. And she's talking to me, and I wasn't listening to her. I wasn't paying hardly any attention to her. I could hear her talking, but I wasn't listening. And then she asked me something, and I couldn't answer because I had no idea what she was talking about. And she said, "Dad," and she said it just like that. And I just felt about that tall. And I apologized to her. I turned the TV off, muted it or something, and then just turned and gave her my undivided attention. She had to say it again, go through all that stuff again, but I told her I was sorry, and I never did it again. And I even did that with my grandkids. Whenever I spent a lot of time in my office here, and they would come in, they're all the time coming in when they were staying with us, and to talk to me, and I would just stop what I'm doing, just turn my chair, and just sit there and just listen to them till they were done. And whenever they're done, they'd leave, and then I go back to doing whatever it is I was doing. But by doing this, a little funny story I need to tell you is I got one granddaughter that talks like in triple fast speed, and they'll talk so fast sometimes I'm just sitting there and I'm like, I can't understand a word they're saying, but I can kind of tell what they're saying by you can kind of tell what kind of reaction they want to get from you. And they'd say something, they'd finish up, and I'd say, "Is that right?" And they'd say, "Yeah, that's right." And so I had to kind of do it in a covert way. But I had one granddaughter, she talks so fast that I'll regularly have to ask her I say, "Will you rewind that and play it back in slow motion, please?" And she'll rewind it, play it back in slow motion where I can understand it. I mean, she was just talking so fast, I just couldn't keep up. But by doing these things, listening to them when they're talking to you, giving them your undivided attention, your undivided attention. Spending a little bit of time with them when they come home. It's going to create what I like to call a legacy of love. And they will end up doing the things that you do with them. They will hopefully end up doing those things with their children. For instance, our son, after he passed away, at the funeral, they were playing a video of him uh, playing what we called it when he was little. We called it bucking bronco. And he'd get on my back on the bed, and I'd just buck around like a get on my hands and knees, and buck around, buck him off, and he was doing that very same thing with his youngest daughter. Now I'm sure he did it with all the others too, but that was the video of him doing it with his youngest daughter, and it was really heartwarming to see my son doing something with his children that he and I did together. Now he enjoyed so much what he and I did that he wanted to do that with his children, and it was just wonderful. It was just wonderful. I guess I'll get on to parenting styles. Helicopter parent, for instance, you don't want to. You want to allow your children to be able to grow up and to become independent. If you're constantly hovering over them, doing everything for them, they're not going to learn. They're not going to learn independence. And I think, one really good way to do that is to just let them, if when they're old enough and it's appropriate for them, let them stay home alone. We stayed home alone all the time, and you know, I know people when our kids were young, there was this big deal about kids being kidnapped, and everybody's worried to death their kid's going to get kidnapped. Well, kidnappings rarely occur. I mean, they do occur, but so does falling off your bike and killing yourself, or falling down some steps and then killing yourself. There's all kinds of terrible things that happen from things we do, but we don't plan our life around it, or just because if something's going to happen, something's going to happen, and you can't you know if a child stays home, for instance, by themselves, they will learn that will help them to learn independence. Whenever we were little, we were told just to come home before dark. Basically, I grew up in the '60s, and it was a wonderful time to grow up in the '60s. We had our bicycles, our friends all over the neighborhoods. We could ride back and forth to each other's houses. Didn't have to, check in. We just left and went, came back at our leisure, and it really taught us independence. And I think that's probably a lot of people my age are probably real independent because they probably lived the same way. And if a kid is staying home by themselves, they're going to learn to one thing for instance is just to be alone. To learn not to always have somebody right there around them. Tending to their own needs, fixing a sandwich, pouring some milk or a glass of water or whatever. They learn to function without other people around, and that is a form of independence. So, um, and as they get older, our children they moved out. You want your children to move out as quick as you can get them to move out. I moved out when about 8 months after I graduated high school. My wife moved out about a month after about a month before high school ended. Yeah, about a month. We got married while she was still in high school, and she didn't finish high school as a result, but she did get her GED and then went on to get her college degree. But we've been married 49 years, and it's earlier, our daughter's 47, and our son would be 41. So I guess it was a match made in heaven. But uh, our daughter, she left. She moved out the night she graduated, and our daughter moved up and moved in with my mom, so she could attend the college up there in the town where my mom lived. And then our son, he moved out about four months after high school ended in order to go to college at that same college. So they both moved out at a young age. Now they weren't independent financially at that point, but they were independent enough to live on their own, make decisions for themselves. Not require us to be standing over behind them. Constantly looking over everything they do. So uh, another recommendation, just to kind of sum it up, is to do things that allow your children to develop independence. There's probably a million different ways to do that. I just mentioned one or two, but there's probably a million different ways to do that. But work on that. They need to become independent. I know of my wife has a friend who has a son who I think he's probably in his 30s, doesn't have a job, can't doesn't have a driver's license, can't do anything. All he does is sit around the house and play video games in his room. And I don't know why his mom and dad let him get away with that. They're just pushovers. They just let him get away with it. And, it's just unfortunate that you got somebody that old who's still being a burden to his parents. And you don't want your kids to be a burden to anybody. They need to be out working, sustaining themselves, being contributing members of society. To me, the most important thing is you want to help people as much as you can, but the most important thing you need to do first is help yourself. You got to make sure you are situated in such a way that then you can then go out and help others. So if you can't help yourself, you're gonna have a hard time helping other people. But monitor their schoolwork. Keep an eye on their schoolwork. Now, when I went through high school, my parents, I think this is one area where they really failed me, is not one time going through high school did they ask to see my report cards. Now, I hid my report cards from them when they came in the mail, but they knew I was going to school. So I wish they had asked to see them or taken the time to go to the high school. If they weren't seeing them in the mail, take the time to go to the high school and look at them. I think if they had done that, if they'd been more proactive on my grades, I think I would have been a better student. There's no doubt. I was capable of a lot better than what I did, in those 2 or 3 classes that I just hated. But keep a close eye on their grades and make sure they stay caught up. If you don't keep up on them and they fall way behind, get in this big hole, so to speak, all they're going to see is the hole, and they're not going to see the way out. They're just going to see this big hole they're in. They're not going to see a way out. So that way they won't feel, the desperation of, the frustration of not being able to get out of that hole. So just make sure they always stay caught up. And if the teachers are good people, they are there. They want to teach your children. Now there's some that probably shouldn't be teaching, probably taught too long, maybe lost all their patience. But for the most part, teachers, they want to teach, and if the parent really shows a lot of interest in their child with the teacher, I think that the teachers, for the most part, will be very responsive to that and really do what they can to help. So, monitor their schoolwork. And a little bit about how my wife and I work together. This was kind of like she's a good cop and I'm the bad cop. I did the discipline. She did the motherly stuff. This was a typical family back then, back in the 80s, and she she did the nurturing, the band-aids, and all that stuff, the fixing the house, cleaning, the cooking, and I went to work and brought home the bacon and provided for the family in a different way. So both of us working together provided for each other. She provided for me, and I provided for her, and she provided for the children, and I provided for her and the children. So it was a teamwork deal, and it just worked out that us being kind of opposite personalities, that We had that blend. Now I did spank our kids. Now spanking is not beating. There's these new agers that want to talk about. I think a lot of problems we have in schools nowadays is because there's just no discipline. You can't do anything to kids. You can't whip them. You can't, you can barely talk back, you know, talk, tell them to shut up or whatever without hurting their feelings. And mom and dad comes down. But, you know, spanking them is not beating them. And these new agers will also, I've heard them say that, well, the kids won't respect the parent. Well, I've got news. Children don't know respect. They don't have a clue what it means. They don't know what it is. All children know is pain, pleasure, safety, fear, hunger, the basic stuff. And they know if they mess up, they get punished. And so if they start to do that thing again that got them punished, they think, oh, that didn't work out too well for me. So I'm not going to do that because I don't want to get punished. And if they do some good things, they get rewarded. So that's the way children learn. They have to learn to respect and be considerate of others. It's not something that's just inherent in a child. They have to learn it through a process of discipline, of expectations, and all of that stuff. So, however your makeup is, if your two parents are real soft and just let the kids run all over them, somebody's going to have to step up and be a little bit tougher, I guess. If you got two parents who are real disciplinarian, like drill sergeants, a kid might not feel a lot of love in that family if the parents don't make it a point to have some tenderness about them toward the child. Then there's maybe those households where each parent is a good mix of both, discipline and tenderness, and the child can feel it from both all the time. So that would probably be an ideal situation. But you just have to kind of figure out what's going to work best, and you will know when if you're raising good children. You'll know. You'll be able to tell by the grades they're making. You'll be able to tell by how respectful they are to you and to others. You'll be able to tell by the comments that others make about them. Other parents, for instance, people just love our two kids. Our son's funeral, it was a massive funeral. The church was full. There was 500 people in the church, and there was about 300 people online watching the service online. Our funeral home guy, he said it was going to be a well-attended event, is the way he described it beforehand, and it certainly was. And people just loved our son, and our grandkids are the same way. I mentioned our grandson, being the most difficult to deal with as a family member, but you talk to his teachers, and they just love him to death. They might all marry him. I don't know. He is a good kid, but sometimes I just want to pull out what's left of my hair dealing with him. But maybe maybe sometimes I'm having too high of expectations for him. But I don't think so. But I'd rather have a little too high than way too low. But you'll figure out what's best, and in the end, you'll know especially whenever your kids get older and have kids of their own, and they're doing things with their kids that they did with you. You'll know that you had a good positive influence on them. So I guess that's going to be about it. Thanks for watching, and I hope this will be very helpful to you. If you want, leave a comment or something down below, and if you got a question or if you want to ask my advice on something, I'm not Dear Abby, but I'm always willing to help. So this is a very important subject. So I guess this is Pepaw signing off. Before we go, I wanted to let you know that there are ways that you can support the channel if you would like to do so. One way is I'll have a list of products listed in the description box down below. And if you click on that link and purchase the product through that link, the link that I provide, I'll get a small commission on it. These are all products that I've gotten from Amazon and highly recommend them. I'll never recommend anything that I haven't used myself and that I'm thoroughly happy with. Anything that's borderline, I won't recommend because I want you to trust me whenever I suggest something to you. Another way will be through. I'll have a Venmo link down below. If you would like to make a donation there, I you can do that. Whatever amount you want to do. I do appreciate anything that you do, or even if you do nothing. I appreciate you watching the video. But one thing I want to do is highlight one of the products that I've got down there, and it's this hand massager. It's a Bob and Brad hand massager. Now these guys, one of them has passed away. I believe I don't remember which one, but one of them has passed away. But they have a YouTube channel where they talk about physical therapy things, and they're really good to watch. I've learned a lot from watching them. So if you have any physical therapy issues that you're dealing with, check them out. I think you'll like it. Just Bob and Brad's. All you got to do is on the YouTube channel. But anyhow, this hand massager is really a well-built hand massager. It's real heavy. It's not very big, but it is heavy. And one thing I really like about it is that these attachments, I'm going to show you the attachments. The attachments screw in like so, and they stay in there. Now I've had some hand massages where the attachments just kind of clip in there, and then they start to get loose and come out, and then they're just not very good hand massagers. And this one, it has this attachment, which is I use this on my feet because it's nice and smooth, and I have plantar fasciitis, and it helps give me some relief for that. But it's hard. All these are for tissue. I don't know of anything that's for massaging bone. But then there's this ball. It's kind of a soft. It's hard, but it's a little bit softer. Same way with this thing right here. This is meant more to glide over your skin, and these work better, if you're gliding over clothing as opposed to directly against your skin, unless you got some type of lotion on there to make it slide better. But then you got this thing here. I don't know what the heck you're supposed to do with that. Torture maybe. I don't know. Be good for that. And then there's this thing here. Now if you got a pinpoint place you need to get, I'm sure that thing will find it. So, like I say, the attachments all screw in. And the thing I really like about this hand massager is it really fits in my hand really well. And if if you got weak wrists, you get some hand massagers that are long, and you're holding the handle, and the massager deals out here, and it's putting torque on your wrist. This thing, you can grab it like that or like that, and really push and keep your wrist straight, and it won't put any stress at all on your wrist. That's one thing I really like about it. So, yeah, through the description box below, and I highly recommend it, along with the other products that I have down there as well. And also, don't forget about the Venmo if you don't want to purchase anything. But I do appreciate you coming and watching, and look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you. Bye.